Hi everyone, my name is Paweł Jędrzejewski. I'm the founder of Sylius project and also the company. I also co-organize PHP Airs which is like countrywide PHP meetup. So I help to organize this in my hometown. And this talk is quite special for me because I've been here, not in the exact venue, but I've been here 4 years ago. Anyone attended my talk 4 years ago? Okay, so a lot has changed since then. Not only my bird and maybe a few kilos, but in general a lot of with Sylius. But during this talk, I would like not only to present you the latest version of Sylius that we just released, but also share a few things that I learned when developing Sylius. I believe it's one of the largest, if not the largest, complete Symfony application that is available open source. It has pretty much most of standard web application features that you can imagine, all implemented with testing in Symfony and so on. I've been working with Symfony since preview versions of 2.0. Anyone remembers this page? So this is really old, like, yeah, so this is really old. So I learned a lot during my adventure, which started from this page when I discovered Symfony. So during this talk, I not only want to present the Sylius, but also share a few things that hopefully help you in everyday development with Symfony, even if you don't work with e-commerce apps. So, just a brief introduction about what is Sylius. It's open source PHP e-commerce framework for tailored solutions. So, in simple words, from developer perspective, we are trying to solve around 70 to 80% of e-commerce functionality that pretty much every online selling application has. So, like every B2B, B2C, marketplace, subscription service, and so on, they all have a lot of in common. So we are not like full, we are not PrestaShop, WooCommerce, which is like upload to FTP, install some plugins and launch store within a week. It's a bit for more tailored applications. Why, I will show you in a second when you see what's under the hood. So on 13th of September, we released version 1, which is quite, which has been in development for quite some time. I would say Sylius, since I talked in Kiev in 2013, was completely rewritten. Hopefully, those of you who have seen my talk before will like what Sylius is right now. So we are top 4 PHP e-commerce on GitHub. The whole Sylius packages, so the main platform together with components. What are Sylius components, you will learn in a second, have been downloaded over 4 million times. More than 700 people are helping us with translating Sylius to different languages. Our Slack channel, which was launched in December, has almost 800 people there, very active, very fun community. And in terms of code contributors, we have over 400 people. If I recall correctly, we were around, I don't know, maybe less than 100 when I was here last time. It hasn't been an overnight success, but rather long, very learning, very long process with a lot of learning. So hopefully some of the things that I shared today will be, will save you the effort that we needed to go through to learn these things. So the core ideas behind Sylius as an e-commerce framework is high developer productivity. It should be easy to integrate because I believe that e-commerce platform or e-commerce solution shouldn't have all the features that you can imagine in an online store, because this simply is far too complex right now than it was 10 years ago. So I believe the e-commerce platform should be easy to integrate with tools which are best in their category. Like, it doesn't make sense to have full loyalty programs inside of Sylius, for example. I would rather make it easy to integrate with like a solution that takes care of this problem. Simple deploy and hosting. APIs, we really focus on APIs. I will talk a lot about this and also give you a couple of tips on how to implement them. And testing. We are crazy about testing. And I think so this is a very good example of how you can completely end-to-end test your application on pretty much every level. So if we have a look at what Sylius is right now, it's on the lowest level, it is Sylius Components. So this is standard PHP libraries. They are not even coupled to Symfony Framework. And the thing we learned here is that whatever you solve, think outside of the framework. Like the framework and Symfony specifically is just a tool to help you process some things on the server side, solve some typical web application problems. But in terms of solving the business problem, in many cases, framework itself is not even necessary. So on this lowest level, we have just standard PHP libraries that you could use with pretty much any framework you prefer. Then on the second level, we have bundles, and these are standard Symfony bundles that basically help you, that save you a couple of days of development if you would like to integrate these components. So this is where we have doctrine mapping, services, routing files, and so on. And on top of this, we have Sylius Platform, which is like full stack, like I said, complete web application built on top of Symfony Framework, and has plenty of features that you can have a look at and see how they are implemented in Symfony environment. So if we take a deeper look at this top level, the platform itself consists of a bunch of other bundles, specifically the admin bundle, shop bundle, and what we call admin API bundle, which basically contains RESTful API. So the cool thing about it is, just like you do with any Symfony bundle, you can also disable these inside of Sylius and have just an eCommerce API server without the front end of the shop or even without the administration panel. And if we have a look at the core, this is the place, another component, and also a bundle which connects all other components together. So that's the place where the product variations learn that they have tax categories, for example. And here is one of the most important things, because I've seen a lot of projects, Symfony projects that try to mimic the architecture that we have in Sylius. So like I said, I think it's good, very good learning material. I know a lot of people who learned testing, Symfony, and even object-oriented programming from Sylius. But do not take our architecture as an example of good Symfony architecture for any kind of application. Because in your custom Symfony app, you operate under completely different context. Like we build Sylius to solve, like I said, 70 to 80% of problems in e-commerce implementations. And your application is built to solve 100% of problems for one specific business case. So just when you look at Sylius, or generally when you look at some solutions, when you're looking for an inspiration, from my experience, it's always good to put that into a context and not copy. Like we have in Sylius, we have a lot of abstraction that is built specifically for extending purposes, because Sylius is used by many developers. They extend, they customize it to fit their specific use case. But in your case, I think there's plenty of things you can borrow, but not everything, like the number of bundles, for example. Typically, I know that Symfony 4 is going to be pretty much bundle-less, but typically in your custom application, usually just need custom Symfony application, I believe the good practice is only to have app bundle, unless you build some kind of integration with some API that can be truly reusable across different Symfony applications. So what do we have for developer productivity? PHP 7.1 with strict typing, and here the tip I can give you, switch as soon as possible. We switched pretty late before stable release. I think it was a couple of weeks before stable release, but strict typing helped us to discover, I think, at least 5 or 6 pretty annoying bugs, simply because your application becomes more consistent and you can easily discover where things go wrong, but you don't notice because PHP. So Symfony doctrine tweak bundles, you know, so even for file system abstraction, we use Goffred, and we hope to switch to Fly system, which I know is a bit more popular right now. But generally, if we try to reuse as much as possible from the community, and really, we have been doing this for a couple of years now, and I think I recommend you to think at least twice before you implement yourself, even if there is a bundle which you don't, even if there is some PHP library or bundle that you don't like that much, because really reusing from community and from what you have available on packages most of the time has two big benefits. The first one, you don't maintain it yourself, and other people can contribute fixes to the libraries used. But the second one is onboarding new devs to the project is much faster because they already perhaps know this bundle or library from other projects. Clean code, solid principles, and specifically the single responsibility principle, about which I'll be talking many times because I think it's one of the biggest advantages that we have, and something that you definitely should use in your Symfony projects. We also have simple CRUD and grid generation components. Perhaps anyone used Sylius Resource Bundle or Sylius Grid Bundle in their Symfony project? Okay, so that's pretty cool. That's good news. Basically, we don't like admin generators, which make too many assumptions about how things are done. But we believe that, especially for CRUD operations or admin interfaces, there was plenty of duplicated work happening first of all in Sylius, but also in custom Sylius projects and basically custom Symfony applications. So we developed a couple of components that can help you and can be totally used outside of Sylius. Because if we quickly go back here, all these bundles and components are available as standalone PHP packages, composer packages. So you can install them on any project. The basic requirement is for components, it's most of the time just PHP 7.1, and for bundles, it's PHP 7.1, of course, and Symfony currently 3.3. But as soon as Symfony 4 is out, we will also upgrade. So these components for rapid CRUD development. Basically, if you have a simple Symfony entity, let's make it a book, and you configure it under Sylius resource in the standard application configuration with YML, and this is how we do a lot of things in Sylius as well. It's just hidden, you don't have to configure it, of course. It's already there in the core. But after you do this, and perhaps generate some routing, this is, as you see, also specific to Sylius, to Sylius resource bundle, not Sylius itself. That gives you pretty much full JSON and XML CRUD API out of the box. When you register one entity, doctrine entity, it works with ORM, but also can work with different drivers. If I would configure here a different driver like PHP content repository, we also used to support MongoDB. Hopefully the support will be back. We just didn't figure out a good way to test it and it was slowing us down, so the driver was removed. But generally it supports different storage packets. But after you configure doctrine entity like this, you get a set of services. The first service is instance of resource controller. In Sylius we use controllers as services. I know there are different preferences, but for us this was the cleanest way where we could actually control the dependencies that go into the controller through Symfony configuration. And this controller contains all the basic CRUD operations that you can imagine. So displaying a single resource, a single item. This is useful for like product page or customer profile or whatever, or like a book, the book presentation page and so on. Index action, which allows you to list resources. So all kinds of paginated and not paginated lists. You don't have to write a single line of PHP to display that in Tweak or in XML or in JSON, because the controller you get is format agnostic. So if you tell, like, give me this book with ID 5, and I accept JSON, you will get the serialized version and not a tweak template. Then you get a factory, which is a very simple service which just creates, by default, it's a simple class that creates you empty instance of your entity. And the reason why we abstract this part and not just use the new keyword is mostly because of testing purposes and being able to mock the creation of the entity. Then we get repository, which is standard doctrine repository that you already know, and the manager. So with these couple of lines of configuration, you get a lot of work done already. Like whole Sylius administration panel, I think there is 95%, like in 95% there is no PHP code for that, and it is pretty powerful. Yeah, and you can configure this resource controller, as you can see. This is app controller book with YML configurations in the routing. So you can customize a lot of things, like use custom templates, forms, custom repository methods, and also use expression services. I'm not saying you should use this kind of CRUD approach for your entire application. Totally no. Like the business operation, this is probably much better for CQS, command buses, and so on. But for prototyping, for CRUD APIs, or just simple CRUD operations, this saves you a lot of development. And you can use expression language from Symfony, so have access to services. Also use some variables from request and so on. So I encourage you, it's a topic for a whole presentation, but for those of you that don't work with e-commerce at all, I think this is very interesting to check for your custom applications. And then the second part of our tools for high developer productivity is grid system, where by grid we understand every single list of items that you have, typical grids with filters and so on. In Sylius or outside of Sylius with help of Sylius Grid Bundle, you can configure them also in YML. They also support different drivers. You can configure fields, filters, and so on through YML configuration. Also introduce your own field types, filter types, and so on. The end result is something like this. So you can easily generate fully functional grids with filters, sorting, custom fields with nice tweak templates for labels and so on, actions here and there. This is all, this whole thing is just configured and you can customize. So it can save you a lot of time, but it's not a typical admin generator, because what is actually happening behind the scenes is just dependency injection magic in Symfony container. So generating the services, this whole definition is turned into object-oriented representation that you can also manipulate using events. And what is cool, it doesn't actually matter for these grids if you make an HTML request or if you browse API. So just like in this case, it is handled by resource controller, and just like I said about getting the book in form of JSON, you can get this list as JSON as well. So our full RESTful API for admins is built using this resource controller. Okay, one of the biggest pain points are upgrades with e-commerce platforms, and we aim to solve it. It's definitely much easier since we have Composer and Symfony, and the things I tell you about right now are not necessarily applicable to all your custom applications, because like I said, very often your applications are used by, I don't know, 5, maybe 10 developers. In case of open source projects, that's hundreds, thousands, and so on. But it's still good practice, and something that we learned from doing from developing Sylius that we also use in custom implementations, is to have a BC break policy. This is very crucial. We just started defining the precise BC policy, like what you can break and what you cannot break in Sylius. Testing culture and built-in tests. Like the standard development workflow of Sylius applications is through test-driven development, and this is also how Sylius is developed. And this helps a lot with upgrades, because it's not like every upgrade is not a lot of manual testing, but you can also run your own tests if you, of course, follow our recommended workflow. But Sylius gives you the ability to run Sylius tests inside of your custom application. So if some part of administration panel or API is not customized by you, you can run the tests we have in your custom application. Of course, things like clean code result in simpler bug fixes as well. And the way to update Sylius is pretty much composer update a package, because in your Sylius standard project, Sylius is a vendor library, like everything else. Of course, you need to clear cache, there might be some migrations to run and so on, but the basic update should be doable with just composer update. And easy to integrate, and here I can give you a couple of tips how to make your Symfony applications in general easy to integrate with other systems, which you probably do a lot. The first one is single responsibility principle, and this is something we are crazy about, because if you have one spot where, for example, taxes are calculated or shipping methods are resolved for an order, it is easy to hook into this place. So just following this simple principle, which of course requires good architecture and abstraction, already makes your software much easier to integrate. We also have the REST API for admins. It's typical REST API that gives you, it's not like GraphQL, which is very cool, for single page applications for processing API in JavaScript frameworks, but for integrations like sending orders to or from ERP and so on, we have the REST API. And the thing that I highly recommend you to use in your Symfony applications is the concept of state machine. Anyone is using state machine in Symfony? Okay, some people do, but some people know. So like state machine allows you to define specific list of states that your entity or pretty much anything, but most of the time its entity can have, like payment state. So it can be awaiting payment, paid, or refunded, and so on. And then the state machine allows you to define transitions between these states. And finally, what we use for integrations a lot is callbacks. And callbacks also through configuration allow you to define what should happen when the order goes from state awaiting payment to paid. So following single responsibility principle combined with state machine callbacks allows you to very, very easily hook into specific places in your application, in the specific like events in the business process. And of course, message queues. So one way to integrate Sylius is to install a plugin. A plugin is just totally a bundle, just with the name plugin and a couple of conventions that we define. But when you want to develop a plugin, wishlist plugin, MailChimp integration, shipping integration, whatever, you actually develop just a Symfony bundle. But yeah, the standard scenario is that you install a plugin that communicates with some application through API. But Sylius is a standard Symfony app. So you can just install the bundles that you already know from your Symfony projects. And one example is, of course, RabbitMQ. So we do a lot of integrations through message brokers, and it's really a breeze to integrate such a message broker with, for example, RabbitMQ bundle. If you find it on packages, it's like the top result that allows you to develop both consumers and producers in a form of very, very simple Symfony services. Yeah, and talking about single responsibility principle, pretty much everything, and if you find something that is not isolated and decoupled into a single interface, one like business responsibility, then report it, because in our opinion it's a bug. But pretty much everything is behind this kind of abstraction, like payment method resolver, which has just one responsibility of getting the supported payment methods for specific payment. And by having this kind of abstraction, it's very easy to integrate with external system that will give us, for example, what kind of methods are available for this specific customer based or whatever data that is perhaps not available in the e-commerce system. So as you can see, the REST API is quite complete. I don't want to lie, but I think it took us, like when we focused, it was, I think, two developers for maybe less than 2 months to implement pretty much complete API using the tools that we have developed. And this is really not specific to Sylius itself. We have cookbook articles on how you can build APIs with these tools in your Symfony applications or Sylius applications if you prefer. So yeah, this is example of the state machine configuration. We are using WinZoo. As you probably know, latest versions of Symfony have the new workflow component, which allows you to configure pretty much similar thing just in PHP. We have been using this implementation since quite some time, so that's why we didn't switch to the workflow component. But basically here you have what kind of states. This is for a product review. What kind of states we can have, what kind of transitions happen, like you can accept or reject product review, and then a simple callback that will recalculate the average rating on the product. Of course, this is very simple use case, but as you can imagine, these are Symfony services, and you can also use expression language and have access to the actual object. In this case, this is product review. But you can easily introduce new callbacks that will send out emails or notify some other services through APIs or whatever. Okay, and something for progressive web apps. This was not main focus of Sylius in the past because we are standard Symfony application, so we use Tweak for rendering. We have the REST API, which, like I said, is more suitable for integrations. But we strongly believe that backend and frontend should be separated. In case of like SaaS applications, user interface for SaaS products, this is much simpler to do than with e-commerce. With e-commerce, you have a lot of things to care about, like SEO or first render performance, and so on. So it's not that easy. But we are totally going this way. Currently, we have something we call Shop API plugin that introduces, unfortunately, not GraphQL yet, but a mixture of RPC and REST API that allows you to build your shop frontend, your application frontend, as a separate React, Vue.js, or whatever application. We have some experience with Vue.js combined with that and also Angular. It seems to work. For Vue.js, for example, you need server-side rendering to solve this SEO or first render performance issues. But it provides you pretty much one-to-one functionality that Sylius has in the standard Tweak rendering scenario. So you can add stuff to cart, you can use coupons, remove items from the cart, do full checkout, browse products, and so on. It's also integrated with Elasticsearch. So again, if you are an e-commerce developer, this perhaps is interesting for you to avoid pulling your hair out because of Symfony forms, for example, and Tweak rendering by having them separated. If not, then you can also have a look how we solve this with full CQS and command bus support in this plugin. So standard Sylius 1.0 application is Sylius rendering both admin and customer interface. Experimental approach, and something that we believe should become standard in the future, and approach that we'll be pushing forward strongly is the Shop API that communicates with REST, React, or any kind of separate front-end application. So test-driven development. We do it in the core, and this is also the recommended workflow for developing Sylius applications. Also very good learning material. like Behat and PHP Spec were developing pretty much together with Sylius, and we have been, I think, one of the biggest open source examples of using, like, not just a bit of Behat, but like totally 120% of Behat, because I believe we developed, I think, 3 or 4 extensions to Behat that make it easy to work with Symfony. There is a Friends of Behat organization on GitHub where you can find them. But we have built in agile workflow with BDD, so you can truly and efficiently, this is most important, because doing BDD, like writing full scenarios, is of course possible, but it takes a lot of time. But we managed to create a workflow that makes it final efficient. So we use Behat for UI and integration testing. The whole user interface is behind an abstraction. So even if you customize the templates of your store, like clicking links or taking order total for testing purposes from the cart summary is behind an abstraction, so-called page objects. Anyone work with Behat? Okay. So basically Behat can interpret like user stories and execute them in Selenium or emulated browser. So the whole Sylius interface is behind abstraction that in your project you can override and still run the tests that we have developed for cart, pricing, and so on. Yeah, we use PHP Spec for what we call emergent design. So it's really, PHP Spec helped us to really develop clean code base. So we use it for unit testing, and we also use PHP unit, because I hate to discuss these things like PHP Spec versus PHP unit. First of all, you can use both tools even for specification, behavior-driven development. And actually, we started doing it with PHP unit and not before PHP Spec 2 was developed. But I believe every testing tool has its purposes. As we work with the BDD approach, we prefer PHP Spec for unit test, but we use PHP unit for API testing. Very similar workflow to what you heard during the GraphQL talk. Like, we make a request to Sylius API, and we have a template of the response that we expect. And we also use it for integration testing. Like, if you want to learn how to test configuration classes in Symfony bundles, also worth having a look. In terms of performance, there are not many Sylius-specific tips that I can give you, except follow solid principles and clean code and so on. This usually results in very good performance and much easier optimization, where you have things decoupled, but most of the performance things we have are provided out of the box by Symfony, so Varnish integration, HTTP cache bundle. We also developed Elasticsearch plugin, and this is wonderful with Symfony World, because it's not like we had to develop Elasticsearch integration from scratch. We used the on-group bundles and basically just glued them to Sylius and configured to work with our products. With easy deployments and hosting, again, this is the place where single responsibility principle will help you a lot. Like having file uploads and file storage under just one specific place behind one abstraction allows you to easily switch from storing images on local servers, storing sessions in files versus storing sessions in database and so on. So this helps a lot. Like deployment to Platform SH, Google Cloud, or just directly to Amazon is a breeze, like with any Symfony application. And if you're a fan of Docker, we have like, I think, 3 or 4 different Docker implementations. So now I'm working on putting them into one official Docker implementation. But so far it seems to work really nice. So if you're interested in what are our plans for the future, of course 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 with a lot of features. We are still defining what are the top priorities, but we will be generally expanding Sylius with the most requested features like multi-warehouse and so on. We are also working on the solution partner program, so growing the ecosystem where the large part is plugins. If you want to learn Sylius and learn Sylius workflows, one good way is to develop a plugin, especially that plugins also support the test-driven development approach that we recommend for custom applications. Basically, we provide a plugin skeleton that inside contains a very small Symfony application, which is actually small in terms of code, but it's actually full Sylius application. So when you develop your plugin, you can use full testing with the complete platform. And this is something we have been also working on, except the code base, is providing you as developers with strong customer success stories, so you can actually convince your CTOs, CEOs to use Symfony and Sylius in your e-commerce projects. There are some quite big companies already running Sylius in production. We're just looking forward to share the stories and make them available for the community. So, thank you. If you have any questions about Sylius itself, I will be here and I'll be happy. I think we have some time to take some questions if you want to ask now. And I'll be here for the REST conference, so happy to discuss anything Symfony, testing, e-commerce related. Thank you.
Hi, I have a question regarding built-in agile workflow. What do you mean by this?
By this we mean that you not only get like, okay, this is Sylius and it's working and just go with it. We actually document it and develop, for example, these Behat extensions so that you can, maybe I could actually, I'm not sure if I don't have the internet connection right now. But like the Behat scenarios that we have in Sylius, and we have, I think, close to 1,500 different user stories. They are written with these steps, like I add something to cart and so on. And these steps are reusable in your application. So let's say if you work in Agile environment and you want to have user stories for the functionality, like custom promotion, let's say this 10% discount on a specific group of customers and specific type of product. For testing, you can actually reuse the steps that we already have and write the user story and have a running test already available and just implement the functionality, configure your shop in a way that that satisfies this scenario. So things like this. Yeah.
So it's about the process of writing scenarios.
Yeah, mostly yes. About process of writing scenarios, like even in my opinion, even strong support and strong testing culture is something that supports agile workflows, because you can't really iterate fast if you constantly need to manually click through the whole application. Yeah.
And what Behat extensions do you use?
We actually developed a couple of our own extensions. It's like I said, it's under Friends of Behat. I think the most important one is the service. I don't remember the exact name, but the extension that allows you, because we know it totally from our own experience that Behat is cool when you look at tutorials. It's cool when you hear a talk about Behat, but it's getting difficult when you want to use it in a real project because there are basically no examples. And I believe that the version of Behat that is just when you install it out of the box is, in my opinion, not enough. So we developed this extension that allows you to define contexts as services, as Symfony services, and have access to Symfony services from your application inside of Behat. So that's, for us, it's very crucial. Let's say we have a scenario that says, given the store operates on a single channel or two channels, we need to take to create new channel objects, save them to the database, and so on. By having this extension, you can just access the services from your application and do that in your Behat context, and also have the context themselves as services, so define and inject all kinds of dependencies. So I think this one is most interesting. We also have something for performance and for importing configuration. So when you work with, I mentioned overriding page objects. So overriding the objects that manipulate your interface. You do that by overriding the services. So it's very similar to how you work with Symfony services. So this is also one extension that we have.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Hello, Paweł. Thanks for great talk. My question is about, for example, localization. And for example, if I want to create the shop for my clients or abroad or in Ukraine, what about, for example, payment methods or shipping methods? What methods do you supply? Or you have some shop, for example, when I can buy the solutions for some integration that I need to create the shop.
Okay, so the question is about localization and available extensions or some kind of marketplace. So first of all, in terms of features, Sylius supports pretty much full localization. So you can have multiple channels. Every channel can have different payment methods, different locales, currencies, different products, prices. So you can have multiple stores. In terms of payment gateways that we provide out of the box, inside of the core, that's PayPal, Express Checkout, and Stripe. But we use Payum, which is abstraction, which is like payment processing framework. It's a completely separate project, but integrated, which already has a couple of other like PHP, PayPal Pro, Gateway, and so on, which is very easy to integrate. But we just launched on our website a listing of plugins, and some of these plugins are already integrating new payment gateways. One that I recall is for a Polish gateway, but no, it's not like in September we just released version 1. So what we focus now is the extensions, plugins, and reducing the development time. Because early adopters right now, if you want to use something probably from Ukraine, you would either need to ask your fellow developers to perhaps share some code from their projects or develop the plugin yourself. But I think in a couple of months it will be much better because we see a lot of interest in plugin development. So hopefully it will be more and more integrations. Thank you.
I even more can add some points about that solution partner program. For instance, our company, Lizens, we have a lot of components which already built it, but for all this platform, for old version of Sylius. So, for instance, we have Nova Pochta, we have a lot of others, local domestic delivery services as well, payment services as well. We have for Russia this one. So we have already a lot of implemented. Until we have no plugins, we can share this, all this our experience. So for now, we can do this. So I think in nearest time, we also have our own publishing, and we can use it. Any questions? No?
Thanks, Paweł. My question is about, before you mentioned about backward compatibility policy, and my question is, how long do you...
Sorry, you need to move microphone a bit...
Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And my question about backward compatibility. How long do you support old and deprecated functionality?
Okay, so we just opened an issue on GitHub which describes our idea for the backward compatibility. I mean, if you work with versions like 0.11 up to 0.19, sorry, that probably was a nightmare if you work with Sylius. But since our alpha release, the upgrades have been much smoother. We have been doing much less BC breaks, and now after 1.0, our BC policy is that up to 2.0, we don't really do BC breaks. We wanted to, but after looking at like real world circumstances, we can't fully support Semver, so there will be some BC breaks between 1.0 and 1.1. We clearly define where these BC breaks will be, mostly related to the data models, but not like removing stuff, mostly adding. So because if we want to follow Semver, this means we can't even add a single field, even if it's nullable in the database, even if it's not required to any entity in Sylius. So that's slowing us down, and we need to wait until 2.0 to have new features. So if we want to really compete with mainstream platforms, we would need to have version 14 in, I don't know, 5 months. So, but definitely until 2.0, there will be, the upgrades should be really, really smooth. We always provide migrations for the database if necessary. We generally avoid changing the database schema. But otherwise, in terms of interfaces, the only like service interfaces, controllers, routing names, this is all BC protected up until 2.0. We don't have an exact date when will 2.0 release. We were thinking about quite quick release schedule and having 2.0 in 2 years. We don't really know. We want to see how it will evolve, because Sylius, this is basically release cycle of Symfony, but Sylius is a bit different. It's a bit one level higher project in terms of like its application also for end users, not just a library for developers as Symfony. So we don't really know when 2.0 will be out, but we definitely keep the BC promise. The only thing that we decided to keep outside of the BC promise is some of the event listeners, but they are also clearly defined. So if you customize these event listeners, you need to have a second look at them when upgrading. But otherwise, services, routing configurations, service IDs, classes, interfaces, this is all protected until 2.0. Thank you for your question.
Paweł, my question is about you showed that about Shop API plugin, and for now we have for the 1.0 release we have admin bundle and shop bundle, which usually just regular Symfony bundle, so it's built with Twig. Do you have a plan, feature plan, for instance, to create a UI based on Angular or React or other framework, JS framework, for admin and for shop itself from your team? I mean, service team.
I mean, it's a bit into the future, but I can already say, because I'm like 100% convinced that Sylius 2.0 will be API only in terms of PHP and backend. So most likely the admin and shop interface that is rendered by Twig will become just a plugin. So if you want to develop your e-commerce store, e-commerce application using standard server-side rendering, you install a plugin. But Sylius by default will be API and will provide a base, most likely, currently we are looking at React, but we will provide a sample application. And this will happen even before 2.0, because we already work on it. So the thing is, the API we have right now is available as a plugin. It's not perfect. Most of the issues we have with it, like too much information, too small amount of information, is solved with GraphQL. So this is also something we will be working on the next couple of months. But yes, we will absolutely provide base application for frontend and the API to use it. So you will have a choice. Like if you prefer to do it this way, you have a separate frontend. If you want standard Symfony rendering for Twig, you go with standard approach. Does that answer your question?
Any more questions? Thank you very much.
One question.
Oh, no.
Hi.
Hi.
As Spryker is pushing into the German market with a lot of force, what do you think about how Sylius compares to Spryker?
Sylius compared to Spryker. First of all, we are open source, they are open code.
I know.
Yeah. I don't have hands-on experience with Spryker. I heard a lot of good things about it. I think it looks to me quite complicated, because it's like trying to do microservices in monolithic application, because they're like everything is decoupled and everything is optional. I mean, yeah, I would rather, when I compare it, I mean, Sylius is definitely more community-oriented project. We don't have commercial edition. In terms of technology, I think because of the fact that Spryker was developed, yes, it was developed based on their experience with building some e-commerce websites, but it was still developed in-house, while Sylius was developed by the community and based on a lot of real-world feedback. I believe Spryker is a bit, in some places, is a bit basically over-engineered and over-complicated. I don't know much about their testing approach. I know they have tests, of course, but I believe they are not so serious about it as Sylius is and do not provide this. So yeah, and it's commercial product, so that's, I think.
Okay, thank you. I really hope they don't just buy you and then you fade away.
No, we won't sell. We won't sell.
Okay.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you again.